Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today we're going to discuss how we can get customers using our product without being so reliant on a funnel model. Let's get straight to it. A trend that's currently having its day in the sun is product-led growth. According to our guest, it's a fine model, but our companies need growth that's based on a more foundational element. They advocate for customer-led growth. Customer-led growth begins with creating organization-wide understanding of what experience is most appropriate for your best customers. You then deliver value to the customers whenever, wherever, and however they need it. And that's how the company should be structured. And our guest pioneered this customer experience mapping while she was leading marketing for the Vancouver-based SaaS company Unbounce. She has been a brand builder since the year 2000. In 2009, she started to get into tech startups and SaaS, and she recognized how pivotal marketing was when you used the right kind of customer-led growth. In 2023, she co-authored Forget the Funnel with her co-founder, Claire Suellentrop, and they together have a consultancy that goes by the same name. Let's go talk to Georgiana Laudi. Georgiana Laudi, thanks for coming on Funnel Reboot.
Thank you so much for having me, Glenn.
No problem. So I'm going to call you Gia here.
Yeah.
Gia, can you tell me the name of the book that we are going to go into today?
Yes, it's called Forget the Funnel, but really the subtitle tells the majority of the story. It's really about taking a customer-led approach to predictable recurring revenue. It's all about being customer-led.
Yep. Your partner in crime for that book?
Claire Suellentrop. That's right.
Right. So you and Claire each have different sub-disciplines within marketing. Can you just, in a real soundbite, give me what each of you had as your strengths before you became a dynamic duo?
Yes. So Claire's background really is, she fell in love with the jobs to be done theory when she was in-house at Calendly. She had a marketing title, but really what she ended up focusing the majority of her time on was getting really intimately familiar with customers' needs as they were activating in the product. So she relied on that approach to help guide a lot of the decisions she was making and ran a bunch of interviews and just fell in love with the approach. So Claire's got deep expertise on the customer, research and customer insights side of things. She's a pro at running customer interviews, parsing customer research. Honestly, she does things I would never be capable of. And then my side of the house, so to speak, has really been more focused on sort of operationalizing the customer experience. And I was doing that pre having customer research to rely on. And really around like building strategies and helping the team basically build really sound strategies for marketing and for overall growth.
Yeah, perfect. And it seems like around the same time that the two of you came together, there was, I guess, a falling out of love with some of the old concepts around marketing. The funnel would be the main one. And I think you had said in the book somewhere that you were just noticing it was getting harder and harder to reconcile the things that you were reporting to management. Here's what's happening. Here's where people are in the funnel with what you were seeing. And that it was very hard to get a particular action that you could do to match what you wanted to, activate a customer on. Is that a fair summary?
It sort of, it really sort of felt like how I often describe it is like, I felt like a chicken running around with its head cut off. That was sort of like my style of operating inside of a very quickly growing SaaS startup. Basically relying on all the tools I had available to me, relying on what I saw my peers doing, relying on what I had done for other companies, basically just I mean, the analogy is so tired at this point, but like literally throwing spaghetti at the wall and just experiment after experiment to see what is going to work. And then sort of, waiting for that experiment to prove its viability and then doubling down on it and then moving on to the next experiment. And that was just sort of the way I operated for a while. And it was very sort of chaotic because I was very afraid of letting the founders down, letting, my team down, letting myself down as a very sort of like ambitious achiever type. And so there was a lot of just guessing and chaos happening. And so I needed to sort of focus and prioritize.
Yeah, but I'm sure that your experience is rather common, that feeling of chaos. And I would say that in a SaaS-based environment where you have a product where you are chasing, future customer revenue, let's say of the customers that you've already acquired, but you're trying to retain, you're putting, R&D effort and product messaging into things, but you don't know whether or not they're going to successfully retain the customer. So that chaotic feeling, that I'm not doing enough feeling, it can drive you mad.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And especially in a marketing role at a tech company, right? Because sometimes marketing has a harder time inside of tech companies. When we first launched Forget the Funnel, it was actually a workshop series that Claire and I launched together. And before actually, bringing it to market and running the workshops itself, we actually wrote a blog post called The Problem with SaaS Marketing. And it was all about kind of exactly that way of operating. And the issue and the dissonance between what marketers sort of believed their value at these companies were versus sometimes the disconnect with founders and sort of outsized and unrealistic expectations of marketing and that mismatch there. And that's actually where Forget the Funnel sort of came from, actually.
Perfect. Let's remember, we're taking usually money that those founders have worked very hard either to bootstrap or to bring out of investors with promises. And we're trying to apply it towards the marketing activities, believing that we know what the customer is thinking. So I guess you're just calling BS on, all right, we don't automatically know what the customer is thinking if we haven't asked them. So why not just come out and ask them, right?
I mean, yes, at the end of the day, I could have saved myself a ton of time because we were successful for sure. When I was in-house, I discovered this way of operationalizing the customer experience that was much more customer focused. And we did it based on what we knew about our customers, but what the team knew, and we were able to operationalize that view and be really, really successful with it. But in truth, it took us months. And it didn't have to take us that long. And though, customer research sounds and is often, sounds like a big lift and hard to do, and it takes a long time, and it sounds like this really huge sort of cumbersome project. Truthfully, it actually saves you time in the long run, especially if you can run that customer research in a really sort of smart and very actionable way, which obviously, is our MO and in helping companies do that. But customer research can actually save you time, which is not typically how people, think about customer research, but it can.
Yeah. Well, a common thing that people slam it with is it comes back inconclusive, and that if you hear the board, management team listening to the results, each of them cherry pick the things that they wanted to hear out of it. So let's dispel that. And you contend that it is possible to get customer research that actually can give us a good direction. So I guess the thing that customer research achieves for us is it will either confirm or deny the strategy that we're currently doing. So I think if we want to be honest with ourselves, if egos leave the room, sure, with a little bit of time and smart surveying, we can get confirmation that our strategy is right and keep going. But more importantly, if there's something really wrong in our strategy, we can find out quick enough to do a U-turn.
Yeah. So customer research definitely, especially the style of research that we advocate for, is basically a tool to help you zoom out and figure out, are we even bringing the right customers to the front door? And are we putting our right foot forward for those customers to communicate to them that we can solve their problem while simultaneously deterring bad fit customers? Once those customers make a decision to give us a try, how effectively are we helping them activate within our product and engage and actually reach a moment of value and activation? And I can talk about that all day long, but ultimately, there's a lot there, right? Especially when we're talking about recurring revenue businesses. It's not just about winning that business. It's about continuously providing value to customers over time and even, expanding on that value as well, right? That's where recurring revenue businesses absolutely shine in that sort of, sphere. So what I'm really trying to articulate here is that there's all styles of customer research, but the style of customer research that we really do advocate is for basically uncovering, who are our best customers and how did they make a decision about us. This is not the same thing as advocating for just listening to customers and, taking every piece of feedback and acting on it. That is not what, we're saying at all with this style of research. Your customer research is one input. The type of business you want to build is another input. Your team is another input. Your aspirations, your goals for what type of business you want to run, like I said, is another very important critical component here. Again, I'm not just saying blindly follow customer feedback, but if you are willing to listen, your customers, your best customers, will tell you exactly what was going on in their world that led them to seek out a solution like yours, who they talked to, where they went to try to solve that problem, what solution they're firing in order to hire yours. And you can imagine right there, that's table stakes for marketing, having that understanding of your customers out in the market, experiencing the problem that you solve, all the way through to your messaging and your positioning, your product onboarding, your customer engagement, your customer expansion campaigns, all the way through. Your best customers have the answers to what you should be doing. They know what that experience felt like. And if you can do that type of research to uncover what type of experience is most appropriate for your best customers, you're going to have all the answers to how your existing customer experience needs to change and can be optimized. And you'll get a list of growth levers that basically become available to you.
Whew. So when you describe it that way, it certainly sits apart from things like a poll that I put on my website,
yes,
or some other,
or exit interviews. We get asked about exit interviews a lot. And,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
But it sounds like there's just no substitute for that one-on-one real-time discussion with them. And you point out that it doesn't have to be a lot of questions. You say you can get insights in under 5 questions. You can find things that are actionable for your company.
Yeah, absolutely.
What tips do you have for how you cull from your customer base for the people that are right to approach?
Yeah. This is definitely the number one question that we get asked. Okay, so I'm on board. Like, where do we start? And the answer, of course, is it depends. If you're in a situation where you have, there's sort of 2 extremes, right? There's the situations where, you work at the type of company where you've got a lower ACV product. Maybe you have a few thousand or a few 100,000 customers, right? That type of environment with that type of customer base, you'd want to, basically start your research slightly differently than if you were selling into the enterprise space and you offer enterprise software and you have a few dozen customers. Obviously, the research methodologies there would be slightly different, but they're very, very related. So I guess at the end of the day, the biggest sort of takeaway here is if you can only do one type of research, to your point, yes, it should be interviews, one-on-one interviews. And there are very specific ways to figure out which of your customers you should even prioritize for interviews. And so part of this, the challenge I'll just mention for a minute, we're working with companies who sometimes have, 400, 500,000 customers in sort of a prosumer type of space. And in that environment, we do leverage customer surveys, very qualitative type of customer surveys to basically pre-qualify for interviews. So we basically use those surveys and parse those surveys to say, okay, these are the customers that we should actually lean into and take the time to interview. Otherwise, you could be running interviews for months and months. And so want to try to make sure that those you do actually take the time to interview are the sort of best opportunity for you to learn from. But at the end of the day, in both of those scenarios, where it's important to start are your customers who are happy, your customers who are paying, and your customers who made a buying decision about you recently enough that they remember what life was like before. So if you've got customers that were, that have been around for 2 or 3 years, they made a purchase decision about your product in a completely different world. Even arguably 6 to 9 months ago, it was a very different environment to be making a decision about a product. So going to your more recent customers that remember what it felt like to have the problem that you help them solve, that's really important as well. So that's your group that you start with basically to either run interviews or run surveys.
I'm reminded of what they say in things like the legal system with courtroom witnesses, that the farther something is in the past, the harder it is to rely on memory.
That's right.
So I think that's definitely true. I guess it's also fair that if you're in a startup kind of company and you're changing, let's say, the experience that's happening, you also need to factor that in, because if they bought when your site worked completely differently or under another brand, that may not be the same kind of valid information you're looking for now.
That's 100% right. Yeah. Products change all the time. So your customer changes and your product changes and the world changes. So even if you've done this style of research, we typically recommend that companies do it at least annually. To basically continue to first and foremost learn about who your best customers are, and then continue to sort of evolve and validate that you're on the right path for them.
Yeah. Before we dive into a little bit about kind of how you would question, you do say that it is even possible for people who are at the extreme edge of the startup world and don't even have customers yet. You point to something you call it audience research that they can use. It's a rough, approximation of what you could get in a customer interview, but there's even a chance for you to find out where people are looking for this sort of help, what their problems are. You point out that that's even a possibility. So nobody is really going to work in a bubble here. Everyone can find some kind of research that will validate what they're doing.
Yes, exactly. I mean, call it audience research, call it customer discovery or customer development. Absolutely. There's no reason, even if you're pre-revenue and pre-customers, there's an opportunity to learn from your customers, especially that are experiencing the problem that you solve. There's not a lot more you could do there's not a lot of other things that you could do that could possibly be more valuable than that, especially if you're developing a product.
Yeah. Rather than just going with your gut.
Yeah.
The book does a tremendous job of diving deeply into the kinds of questions that you can ask. But if we can just give people a taste for how these questions work. So first off, you implore us to forget that we're marketers for a minute, to not be pro-product and not bring that into it, that we have to remain somewhat neutral and curious. But give me just a sense of what would be one of the most typical questions. Where are we as we take them back to the time before they bought our product? What are we trying to suss out?
So what I might lean into in terms of what are going to be the most insightful questions for folks thinking about doing this type of research, it will ultimately come down to what are you trying to achieve with this research. So some companies that we're working with, they're like, we're getting tons of amazing signups coming through our front door, but not enough of them are actually turning into, paying customers. So they might be trying to tackle product activation or product onboarding, trial to pay conversion or free to pay conversion. For those folks, there is, there's certain aspects of this research that will be more insightful versus other companies, which, just as many come to us that are basically saying, we don't know that we're putting our right foot forward here. We don't know that, our positioning and our messaging is resonating with the best customers. And so to those folks, when I might put a slightly different emphasis on the research at the end of the day. So you can imagine in both of those scenarios, this type of jobs to be done research is wildly valuable. All of these questions are valuable in both of those situations. But just to sort of give a taste of what types of challenges or, growth challenges people can tackle with this type of thing. Positioning and messaging and identifying who your ideal customers are, that's huge. And it's kind of existential, especially after the pandemic, especially as your product evolves, versus the situations, which happens quite a lot as well, where companies come to us and they say, what, our product onboarding just isn't doing its job. We need to figure out, what parts of the product to introduce in what way and when and how. So again, There's slightly different focus there. But at the end of the day, I'd say even those two situations, there's two questions that really sort of, stand out as being wildly valuable in both of those scenarios. One is the one that you were just alluding to, which was like, what was going on in your world that led you to sign up for this product today? Now, you can ask that question inside of a customer interview. You can also ask that question if you really want to lower the barrier to start to get some insight about this. Start adding that to your sign up, page, basically. Open text field. What led you to sign up? What was going on in your world that led you to sign up for our product today? You will get all kinds of amazing, rich voice of customer and information. You don't have to act on it. Just start collecting the information. That can be added to a sign-up form. It can be added to an email that gets sent after somebody signs up for your product. Or even better, our first choice would be, one of the first questions you ask in a customer interview. And then the other question, which is wildly insightful for that other situation that I was describing, was, what was the point at which you knew that this solution was going to solve your problem? Because if you get the answer to that question, you get insight into the specific motivators, the specific things about your product that convinced that person to keep going. And you get the answers to basically, what should that early product experience look like for them? What are the parts of the product that you should really lean into and showcase as quickly as possible? Just the answers to those two questions, you can come up with a completely different strategy, not only for your marketing, right? So what was going on in your world, that gives you a ton of insight into like how to articulate the problem that you solve, where these folks might be out in the world experiencing this problem. And then that other question really gives you a lot of insight into, what do you put on your website, right? What are those value themes you really lean into on your website? And what are the parts of the product you should showcase as quickly as possible once somebody actually does make a decision to give you a try? Those are my two favorite. Obviously, there's more, but those are like two standouts for me.
Right. And as you point out, we might get some great insight out of this. But that thing that we mentioned at the top about how chaos may be reigning, we can't just run as fast as we can in every direction once we have these insights. This is where we're going to get to that framework. And we're going to talk about that as soon as we come back from a quick break. Do you have a lot of company data in reach, but struggle to get useful business insights out of it? Do you open up your Google Analytics, but find you're at a loss on how to get it reporting the way you want? Do you wonder what new marketing strategies you could leverage if you could just unlock what's in your data? If you said yes, then you sound just like other clients did when they started working with me. Many B2B companies who I've done project work with have been helped by modernizing their analytics. Should you be ready to begin a project, let's talk about what you would like your analytics to do for you. Please reach out today via the podcast feedback channels or search up marketing analytics people on LinkedIn. I'm usually the first Glenn that pops up. Okay, let's get back to the show. Okay, Gia, so jobs to be done. This is something that people might have heard of, maybe some haven't. Would you kindly level set for us and tell us, what this thing is that has this kind of quirky name.
Yeah. So the jobs to be done theory is, it's based on the idea that our customers are hiring our solution to do a job for them. They're firing their existing solution and hiring a new one. It is really, it is what we rely on to guide the research that we conduct that we then operationalize with customer-led growth. So jobs to be done is a really important component to customer-led growth because it helps us pull out that insight, that documentary of our customers' sort of life, right? From struggling with the old way, deciding one day that they have to find a better solution, where they go to find the answer to that, how do they make a decision, or how do they discover us once they discover us, how do they make the decision to try us, and so on and so forth, as I was describing. It's that we often describe it as like the documentary of how, I met and fell in love with your product. So we rely on the jobs to be done approach to guide the style of research that we do. And once we've run that research and we basically have our interview transcripts or our survey responses, what we then do is we parse it to identify what are those jobs to be done in terms of the themes, the patterns that show up in the responses. So we come up with a customer job statement, but not only do we come up with a customer job statement as a way to sort of encapsulate these groups of customers, it's a customer job statement is, like I said, an encapsulation of these different groups of customers, but it's also a tool for the team to sort of rely on in a very sort of shorthand way to sort of still deeply understand our customers. We're not very big fans of ICPs and personas at Forget the Funnel. We really do rely on customer jobs as the more meaningful way to think about how we segment our customers and communicate to our customers. But that's not the end of the story. I want to pause, but basically, like, once we've identified those customer jobs and those groups of customers, then we can start to operationalize in ways where we can build those strategies, review what we're doing today, come up with KPIs, and really, sort of hit the ground running in terms of actually executing against what we've learned.
Yes. Okay. And I'm going to jump in on that pause because just as a person who went through the book, I found it so refreshing that you up until that point, you're saying the answer to your customers is go ask them. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of disarming. Mm-hmm. And then as we were starting into a part that's explaining a big framework, I was kind of, preparing for something that, sounded very academic. And no, it's just like you've said, you have a simple way of thinking about how a customer is moving out of either chaos or maybe using inferior solutions up to what they're currently doing, how they had a initial struggle and then they were motivated to get out of that place of struggle and thought about a desired outcome and then took some actions that, lo and behold, have let them claw their way out of that struggle and gotten the outcome. So what I find so fun about this is if people are wondering, well, when am I actually using jobs to be done? My answer would be, you're using it when you just start to borrow from the language of how you would manage people. Like if you think of the product or of the way that you found the product as something that you gave a job to, like you took 10 minutes and went and looked at something. Well, that was, a managerial decision to hire a few minutes of time and go do a job search, right? And so I love that. We could just play with that language. And while it, probably doesn't do it with the full rigor that you and Claire had, it gives us the idea of where you're going.
Yeah, it's really this holistic view of your relationship with your customer. And it, importantly, and we tend to skip this a lot, but that doesn't start when somebody lands on your website, right? And marketers know this inherently because marketers spend, their better part of their lives, out in the market, trying to reach these amazing customers. But a lot of customer journeys, a lot of customer journey maps, I should say, ironically start at somebody landing on your website. which skips over, honestly, maybe the most interesting part of understanding your customers, which is that problem space. So anyways, all to say that the jobs to be done framework or theory rather, is super helpful for figuring out what that high level relationship with your customers are and the value that you provide to your customers. And then once you've got that understanding of your best customers, something interesting also happens when you start parsing that research, which is you're going to end up figuring out that, oh, hey, there's a couple of different groups of customers here. We might be bringing in, some customers that are just getting started on this journey. We may be bringing in others that are a little bit further along. And you realize that actually, the way that we solve this problem is better suited for one of those groups or another. So one great example of this is actually a company that we worked with. It was in the social media, space and the MarTech space, and they were prolific with marketing. They had a very active content marketing team. Their founder did tons of amazing thought leadership. For years, they built this company on the back of incredible marketing. And when we actually leaned in to do some of this research, and P.S., we actually did this with surveys alone. We didn't even have to run interviews. But when we leaned in on the research, what we realized was this company was bringing in two very different types of customers. They had a vocal majority that were just getting started with social media, adding this channel into their mix. Their job to be done was about growing their audience. They really wanted to grow their audience and grow their business. That was their main focus, versus this other group of customers that were coming through the front door. They were much quieter. They were smaller in numbers, but they were a lot more successful. Those were the customers who had already validated the social media channel, and they were looking to automate some of their marketing. And so this company for years had been very vocal with their content marketing, like I said, blogging and e-courses and, ads, all to bring in actually those, what we ended up calling like more noob type of customers. And at the end of the day, what we realized was actually out of these two customers' jobs from the research that we were looking at, it was actually those looking to automate their marketing that were a lot more successful with the product. They stuck around for a lot longer. And so we made a decision as a group, basically, to lean in on one of those customer jobs and not deter those other customers, but just not lean in quite as hard on the marketing side. And obviously, this is a successful story, but ultimately what ended up happening was we leaned into those customers wanting to automate some of their marketing, updated just 3 pages on their website. And because they were bringing in a better customer, not only did their sign-up rate on their website improve 90%, this was in a 2-month span, but their trial to pay conversion rate also increased 40%. And we didn't actually do anything other than update 3 pages on their website, all because they were bringing in a better, more qualified, customer through the front door. So that's an example of a company who we worked with where there were 2 legitimate jobs to be done that surfaced out of the research. Right. And we made a strategic decision to focus on one, and the results were incredible.
Oh boy. So gotta go into a little bit of what you said there. The important point that I got is there's only one job that a customer is looking to do. So in that case, we found 2 different segments, each that were imagining the product could do their own job. And without beating a dead horse, this does, of course, bring us back to how the funnel is inadequate at describing this, because if we used funnel stages to simply say we have customers that are moving from point A to point B, well, there might be, but if we didn't segment them by what they were looking to get out of it, we would be clumping them all together.
Yeah, segmentation is a really worthwhile exercise here, especially in the case of, for instance, I could have been working with this company that I'm describing to you, and they could have very easily said, you know what? Yes, let's lean in first to these customers that are looking to automate, but we don't want to deter those other folks. And truly, what they had an opportunity to do then was offer 2 different onboardings into their product. They could have offered those newer to social media, a slightly different onboarding that maybe had more guides or more how-tos, more 101 level type of stuff, versus those customers that are just looking to automate. They don't want the 101 guides. They know what they want. They know how to activate within this product. So you could, give those customers an option to basically skip over that stuff. So it's not to say that your product can't address and be successful with multiple jobs to be done or addressing multiple customer jobs. But you do need to be sort of, strategic about it and provide the most appropriate experience. And that's really where sort of the customer-led growth, sort of customer experience mapping comes into play, because then we can understand, again, zooming out on that holistic experience, we've got the problem space that they're living in, right? That sort of struggle phase where they are experiencing the problem. And then we've got this evaluation phase where they've decided to give your product a try, and we can identify what are those major milestones in that evaluation process. And then furthermore, what I was alluding to earlier, recurring revenue businesses, there's a growth phase as well. And that's really where continued value comes into play, and also value expansion comes into play. And so if you can identify, get a deeper understanding of those phases in your customer's, relationship with you, and break them down into these key sort of value milestones, then you can start to, really drill into what are customers, doing, thinking, and feeling at each of these milestones. And furthermore, connect the dots between what customers say is valuable to them and the specific parts of your product that deliver that value. And then things start to get really, really interesting with KPIs. But that might be the topic of another podcast episode. Or you could just read the book because it's all in there.
Sure. But your point about if we start with the jobs to be done, then we're at least moving them into different experience camps. And we are, importantly, tying that value that they're getting, because they were hoping to get, right, the job they were hoping
connected to
your product would do, would give them value. So they're only going to stay around and be a continued SaaS subscriber if that becomes true, but that you've got an infinitely greater chance of doing that if you understood what they were aiming for in the first place.
That's right. Yeah. And exactly what is motivating them to, continue to move forward, what some of their objections and deal breakers might be. If you can understand your customers at that level, you will have an amazing amount of, insight available to you to help connect the dots between what they're looking for and what your product basically does. And that's a big part of actually the process. When we are working with companies or when somebody's going through this CLG process, is mapping customer value to the specific parts of the product that deliver that value. If you can do that value mapping, then you can really figure out what is that most appropriate sort of messaging strategy, but even early product experience, and make sure you're surfacing what people are looking for in a really sort of appropriate and also timely way.
Sure. So you are right. There is a section devoted to KPIs. We may not have time to get through all of it, but maybe from the outside, Gia, what I'd like you to share with someone, who is listening to this and they're in the trenches and they're giving an honest try to implementing the system you described. You warn them that their KPIs, most of which are usually lagging indicators, will not be showing the fruits of their labors, and that they are going to have to deal with that, at least in the near term. So could you maybe, give them a shoulder to cry on, or at least tell them, having seen others who've been down the road, can you tell them maybe what it normally goes like for them so that they don't lose heart?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking specifically about KPIs and leading and lagging indicators, I would say look for any leading indicators that you have available to you that your company is already using and measuring today. That is not weekly active or monthly active or daily active users. Unfortunately, that is not the most typically advantageous leading indicator, though it is something. Essentially, if you've got a product activation, a way that your company measures product activation, maybe it's they publish a page for the first time, or maybe they, set something up inside of their account, anything that indicates to you that your customers are reaching some sort of moment of value, I would say hold on tight to that KPI and focus on that and moving the needle there. If you can help customers get to value and focus your efforts on the leading indicators of success available to you, then your lagging indicators will benefit as a result. So that's what I would say. Again, look for the leading indicators. They're where, teams can sort of rally around like action, right? As opposed to the results and saying, oh, MRR is down or MRR is up, but like, who knows why? But really focusing on those KPIs that show you've done your job helping customers get to a moment of value, whatever your company or team has available to you to lean into on that side, I would say grab a hold of.
Right. I think we have all experienced where maybe a KPI, like you said, that is something like MRR, maybe it's in an organization where there's a little bit of it's a little bit aggressive between the different teams, and maybe one team can do signups and that
MQL. That's my favorite
number.
one. Like
MQL
and so, has anything to do with value being delivered or credit card
that's
entered, like just void of meaning.
So when we do that, that usually leads to intra-organizational squabbles. Mm-hmm. What you're proposing is that we all try to find something of a customer metric that cannot be gamed and that no one team within the entire org can claim they pulled off. And so you're actually helping in two ways. You're getting a truer, North Star metric, but you're also hopefully allowing different parts of the organization to put aside pettiness and come together for something.
Yeah, and be focused on moving the needle on something that actually delivers customer value. And I don't know a team that isn't motivated by delivering value, right? At the end of the day, we all want to, we all want to believe that what we're doing is providing value to folks and helping people get out of, painful situations or struggling with their old way. And so it can also be very, very motivating to focus on a KPI like that. I would say there's, especially again in SaaS, there's this first moment of value or activation KPI that you should be looking for. And then there's also ongoing engagement, continued value KPI to be looking for. Those two, ultimately, if you've done this research, you've done this jobs research, and you can identify the milestones in your customer's relationship with you, ultimately, at the end of the day, those two KPIs can serve as those North Stars for many teams. The marketing team, obviously, making sure that the people they're bringing through the front door are actually getting value out of the product, not just signing up for the damn thing. And then ultimately also that ongoing sort of meaningful engagement so that that they're high LTV customers as well. And that's where really MRR sort of hits its sweet spot and those lagging indicators hit their sweet spot. So those, I would be looking for product activation and product engagement as your leading indicators. I know I'm just like adding on, but
no, but it's good. And you're also speaking with the experience of many, we have now got at least a decade under our belts of SaaS metrics. So for those who, began with, some very well-intentioned books or slide decks that talked about certain flavors of metric counting, those were good. Mm-hmm. They were,
Hey,
skeletal.
Pirate metrics is how
Pirate metrics, right?
That
had its place.
That was my foray into SaaS. I was like, oh, pirate metrics, amazing. Everybody understands the role for marketing post-acquisition. Like I thought we'd nailed it then. That was 2012. Like it was a long time ago. And no, pirate metrics, while well-intentioned, generic, not necessarily rooted in customer value. But again, to your point, was definitely had a huge impact on me for sure. And then the MQL and the SQL, which I love to pick on as well, the PQL, which I hate a little bit less. But at the end of the day, what matters is we're measuring customer value. And if you call that MQL or PQL, do it up. as long as, the team, as long as the actual meaning of those KPIs are rooted in customers getting value. Because at the end of the day, if you can help customers achieve their goals, your business will achieve its goals. And that's what we all want.
Sure. And we could even keep it right within the value wheelhouse, where if we think about it, the company itself, what is its valuation? I've had another guest on the podcast say that it is nothing more than the sum total of all of the individual customers' value that they are putting into the product by actively subscribing. Yep. So you want your company's overall valuation to go up. This is where you need a value metric, and I think that that's a 100%. Fair criticism to make of anybody who says that it doesn't matter or that customer value is this loosey-goosey idea. Far from it. This is something that's very tangible because customers act rationally and they're only going to do things that are in their best interest.
That's right. Yeah.
So if we can tie to that, then we're golden. Gia, this has been immensely helpful and interesting. And you not only have the book out for this, but there's a workbook as well. Yes. So tell us a little bit about what Forget the Funnel as an entire package looks like.
As an entire package. So not by choice, we named our book the same name as our consultancy. So if you go to forgetthefunnel.com, you'll see that Forget the Funnel is a book, but there's also a business there. My business partner and I, Claire, we were talking about earlier, we work with SaaS companies, B2B SaaS companies, basically running through this process for all types of B2B SaaS companies. And we love the work and we're in the trenches ourselves day in, day out. So there's, that way of sort of tackling this. Of course, in the book, we run through how to do it all yourself. So we wrote it to be very practical and very useful. It's also not a tremendously long book. We wanted it to be something that you could get through in just a couple of hours and really start to percolate and think about how am I going to apply this, for our business and pass it on to a colleague. And then furthermore, not only is the book itself, very practical, but we also provide a workbook, which is almost as long as the book itself. I think it's about 110 pages and growing right now. There's all kinds of resources in there, checklists, templates, there's email templates, like how to get buy-in on doing this type of work from your boss. There's an email drafted to send to your boss to get buy-in on this. There's an agenda for your kickoff call. You name it. There's a lot of resources in there. And if you pick up the book, you can request the workbook, and basically as you go through, I definitely recommend, and the way to process the book is read it front to back and then go back and get the workbook and then, pass it on to a colleague and start executing on it as a team. This is a team sport. Teams are stronger when they do this stuff together. And this is definitely not something that a marketer should try to go it alone. Involve customer success, involve product, sales, go across get cross-functional with it. And you'll be a ton more successful with it. So, that would be my recommendation, is to, pass it on basically.
Yeah, a lot there. Yeah. Gia, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Glenn. It was fun.
You've left me convinced that the customer-led approach is how we're going to gain insight into our marketing and make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.